In this episode of Plants of the Gods, join ethnobotanist Dr. Mark Plotkin in a conversation with world-renowned mycologist, botanist, author, and research scientist, Dr. Christopher Hobbs. In the first half of this two-part episode, Dr. Plotkin and Dr. Hobbs discuss the healing potential of fungi and medicinal herbs in modern times.
All right, welcome to Plants of the Gods. We have a very, very special guest, Dr. Christopher Hobbs. We are living in what's been called the psychedelic renaissance, but I think we could also term it the fungal renaissance, and that's going to be part of the discussion. So Christopher Hobbs is an herbalist, a mycologist, a healer, and a teacher. And if you know your fungi, I would say that Christopher Hobbs and Paul Stamets are the two leading figures that people look to get the straight stuff. So it is an honor and a blessing to have him here on the podcast. Welcome, Christopher, Dr. Hobbs.
Thank you, Mark. Very, very happy to be here.
Now, there is a lot of information floating around on mushrooms, more every day it seems. We're here at the Telluride Mushroom Festival. But the book I want to start out with, which should belong on everybody's shelf, is that of Chris's most recent production, which is Medicinal Mushrooms, The Essential Guide. It's a feast for the heart, the mind, and the soul. It's brilliantly illustrated. It's news you can use, and it's factual because there's so much information floating around, it's hard to know what to trust. But if Hobbs says it's true, it's true. So my first question to Christopher Hobbs is, why the sudden interest? Why are we living in the age of mushrooms? Why are people coming around to what you've been saying for decades, if not longer?
Well, that's a good question, isn't it? I had my first introduction to mushrooms in 1977 when Paul Stamets had his first or second, gathering up on Orcas Island. And I went there, and Dr. Smith was there, which is one of the early, authors of the guides, the mushroom guides, one of the only, set of guides out there. And Guzman, the world's leading authority on psilocybin, and Trappy, the world's leading authority on truffles, and more. So I just took off like a rocket after that. And since then, my grandmother and great-grandmother were herbalists. They were community herbalists. My grandmother was the community herbalist on Colorado Boulevard in Pasadena. And she had her little herb garden there, and she took the trolley down into the Los Angeles and studied with a Chinese herbalist. It was pretty hard for me to believe now because I ended up going to China and studying Chinese medicine and getting a license and so forth. So I've had this introduction to and a family and bloodline for medicinal herbs, and that's obviously how I could get plugged into that. My dad was a professor of botany. His dad was a professor of botany. So I pretty much didn't have a chance. I didn't have a choice there. But then that mixed with, none of my family really were healers or, into medicine, using the plants for medicine. So I don't know why I got into that. My mom actually was, probably because my mom was a Seventh-day Adventist, my grandmother was, and they were really into healthy diet, and health. And I still remember a painting, like a needle point my mom did that showed fresh air coming in, somebody in the bed, the curtains are blowing, a good diet. And so I think I just got into health early. And then my dad had a heart attack when I was 19, a really serious heart attack. And he just went from being a really strong man to just looking so pathetic. And I just said, I'm not going that way. His diet was like bacon and eggs and Farmer John's sausage and, every morning. And I said, I'm not going to do that. And I switched to be a vegetarian. I met Paul Bragg, and, I bugged him, can I travel with you? Can I study with you? And got, miracle of fasting. And so that's what got me into health. And so I just combined health with my knowledge of plants and love of plants. And there's herbal medicine. And then I found out my grandmother and great-grandmother were herbalists. So it all just, came together. And then in 1984, somehow I got onto this idea that mushrooms can also be medicine. And I think what it was this little book by Kanoko, which is a mushroom company in Oakland, California. And this guy that was in Kanoko, as an herbal medicine vendor, I guess, and he translated this book, The Fungi Pharmacopoeia, from China. And I ran across a copy of that in a used bookstore. Well, I've also been like a fanatic book collector, and it was Erasmus that said, when I get a little money, I buy books, and if I have a little money left over, I buy food and clothes. So that's always been me. I have 8,000 books on herbal medicine, mycology, and so forth. So I've been collecting my whole life. So I ran across this book on Fungi Pharmacopoeia, and I went, oh my gosh, all these mushrooms, like were over 100 mushrooms that they detailed their medical uses. And that's what really kind of connected the dots for me. And from then on, I just, I wrote my first little pamphlet on medicinal mushrooms in 84, 85, along in there, and then another small edition in 89, and then the second edition was 95, which was a lot expanded, and then now the new edition, which is, that's what, 25 years, something like that.
Well, one of the things that intrigues me about your almost unique background is that you're not only a fungi specialist, but also an herbalist with using flowering plants as well, which seems to be a rather unique combination outside the Chinese context. So I want to mention to our listeners that your classes are available on the Shift Network. I had the advantage of taking your wonderful medicinal mushrooms course, and now I'm taking your psilocybin course. So you're also a teacher. But I wanted to ask you, Chris, about the future of Western medicine in terms of bringing in plants and bringing in mushrooms, which are not the same thing. And as somebody who's working with both, what can you tell us about what you think the future is going to look like?
That is a very interesting question. Of course, I'm completely biased, so I always think that that it just makes so much sense to use medicinal herbs and mushrooms for health and healing as the first line of treatment and the first line of defense. And when you talk about, for instance, prevention, when our government or when FDA or whatever mentions prevention, that's getting an injection. That's getting a vaccine. To an herbalist, prevention is, especially if you've studied traditional Chinese medicine or any traditional system of medicine, prevention is taking a look at what is going on inside your body, looking your tongue, feeling your pulse, hearing your health history, your diet, what emotions you're feeling, because in Chinese medicine, the emotions are really considered potential pathogens or healers. So I think that, for me, and thinking about the future, I'm just so enthusiastic about the fact that so many medical doctors now, I know a lot of medical doctors that use Chinese herbs and herbal supplements. They haven't really been trained. You don't find too many people too many straight medical people, industrialized medicine, that have a good training in herbal medicine. And even in the naturopath profession, I looked at that up in Bastyr. That's for your listeners, naturopathy is got some cachet as a licensed medical practitioner in about 18 states, something like that, mm-hmm. including California. Mm-hmm. And so there are a lot of naturopaths, and that's basically nature cure, diet, but they're generalists, and so there isn't much herbal training. I was really surprised at how little herbal training they have. So even the naturopaths, MDs, chiropractors, they all prescribe and recommend ginkgo for memory, but it doesn't go much beyond that, is what I found. But nowadays, I think there really is a sea change. I really think there is a big shift in what's happening. Herbal medicine is becoming more and more popular. We're seeing really incredible growth, and especially during the pandemic, of course, because people are worried about their immune system. They want to stay healthy. So I think that's a big piece of it right now. But most of the companies I know have seen big growth over the last 3 years because of the pandemic and people. So now people, I think we're finding, are taking more responsibility for their own health. They are they're reading more about herbs. I'm not a TV watcher. I don't have a TV, but I have friends that do, and I go over there, and there are all these advertising for echinacea and ginkgo, and all these. So now it's really getting more and more mainstream, and I really see it going because there are just so many advantages. Like I said, it's sustainable. It's really the most sustainable medicine. You don't have to, like when you produce aspirin, all these toxic chemicals are released in the atmosphere and in the water. But with herbs, I mean, it's completely sustainable. The extraction can be carbon dioxide. You can recapture that. It can be ethanol. You could even recapture that. But so there's extraction, and you make powders, and they're so easy to take every day. Put them in your smoothie. Make a tea with a teaspoon of the powder, and so it's very easy to take. And it's really, I think it's a food medicine. I really want to be clear that herbs are not drugs, and there are many reasons why. We could discuss that. It'd take a whole half an hour to discuss that. But herbs are not drugs; they're food medicine, really, and so they don't have the kind of side effects that most drugs do.
Well, since you mentioned the issue of Chinese herbs, I do a lot of my work in Suriname in northeastern South America. There's an enormous Chinese population there. So there's a lot of traffic between mainland China and Suriname. But one of the things we're finding is a lot of the products imported from China, like toothpaste, are terribly polluted with all sorts of nasty stuff. So those of us who are interested in Chinese herbs, how do we best source and know that we're not getting in any bad stuff along with the good stuff we're searching for?
Can I mention companies?
Yeah, by all means.
Well, it's really difficult. You're right. That is really a major concern. And, I go in a lot of Chinese herb shops in San Francisco, in Oakland. I get samples of mushrooms. I get samples like wood ear, dried wood ear, and reishi and so forth for my classes, and not for my use. I mean, I see insects in just crawling in the reishi. And we've done tests on some of these Chinese herbs that have come right into herb shops. The quality is very low, and then you can also tell that they're dusty. They've been around for a while. They're in open bins. So even though I so much value the medicine and the tradition and the history, you're right. The herbs are difficult. So there are several companies that are concerned about the quality of the herbs, because with the average herb coming from China, you can get heavy metals. That's been proven. You can get sulfites. That's well known. If they can be fumigated when they enter the country, they can be irradiated when they enter the country. They're sitting on a boat. Think about it. They're sitting on a boat for months and months. Coming over here, they can absorb moisture. They can start getting mold counts in there. So there's a lot of reasons for really taking a close look at the sources of your Chinese herbs. However, Chinese herbs are incredible. I mean, there's so many good herbs that have been studied by, with chemical analysis and much more, like pharmacokinetics and dynamics of the herbs. And so the herbs are fantastic. The system is fantastic, but unfortunately, most of the commercial herbs are coming over here are not very good quality often. There is Springwind, Andy Ellis. He's probably the leading light of Chinese herb quality. You go into his warehouse or, going to buy something, the andrographis, which is an incredible antiviral herb, you pull out a bag of that and look at it. I mean, it's dark green. It looks so beautiful, and you smell it, and it smells so fresh. So he's like the leading light of Chinese herb quality. Then you've got Asia Naturals. They're in San Francisco or Oakland. So both of them are in Oakland, Berkeley area there. And they also are very careful about.
And these are purchasable over the internet, or
yeah.
Okay, good. That's good to know.
And Fat Turtle also has Andy Ellis's herbs, and then there's Mayway. So those are really the three.
Spell the last one, please.
Mayway, Mayway.
Okay. Now, I know there's a bit of a debate in the mycological community over the value of using fruiting bodies versus mycelia. And I've actually heard you touch on this, but I'd like to ask you to share your thoughts with my listeners.
Yes, well, in our segment, in the natural products industry, which is a very big industry now, there is the medicinal mushroom segment. So it's a smaller segment. It's more of a niche in a way, but it's growing fast. So many people are, especially younger people. I'm finding a lot of younger people just fascinated with lion's mane and all these other ones and wanting to grow them, and so that's really exciting to see that young energy coming into the medicinal quality of mushrooms. But one of the biggest discussions in buying a medicinal mushroom product, there are several, problematic questions that could come up. When you're going to go buy lion's mane, you're going to go buy reishi, you're going to buy turkey tail. You can get it in different forms. First of all, you can buy a tincture, which I don't recommend because one of the main active compound groups are the beta-glucans. Those are part of the cell wall. Those are the main immunomodulating compounds. They have zero solubility in alcohol. So therefore, people that are making reishi tinctures and so forth, that's not the best way to go because you're losing all of that, research worldwide on the beta-glucans. So that's one of the, what form are you getting it in? So there are capsules, there's powders, there's liquid, the tinctures again, there's double extractions. Double extraction is kind of like a compromise. You're boiling it down, so you're getting a tea, pressing out the water, tincturing the marc that's left over, and then once you press that out, you're mixing the two together. So you're getting some beta-glucans and you're getting some phenolics and terpenes, which are the smaller molecular weight compounds that have anti-inflammatory and antioxidant effects. So you get more of a whole picture, but you're still compromising. The powder, so there are two ways to get powder. So I really recommend the powders. You can get powders and capsules and swallow the capsules. I don't like that too much because I don't like swallowing a bunch of capsules. Also, you don't get as good a value. You get a much better value buying a bag of powder. So a lot of vendors, a lot of manufacturers out there and growers have powder in bags. So that's probably the most common way that you would buy medicinal mushroom products. So that's fine. Make sure they're heat treated. That's very important that they've been heat treated. You don't use any mushrooms that haven't been heat treated. You have to break down the cell wall to make everything bioavailable. So once you got that part down, okay, I'm going to get a powder, a lion's mane. I'm going to get them, make sure it's heat treated. I'm going to get, Hericium erinaceus with the main species. That's about all they sell in lion's mane. There isn't much adulteration in lion's mane. In cordyceps, yes. In reishi, there's some different species. But lion's mane, pretty much you're going to get the right species. So now it comes down to the big question that you asked, which is, okay, a lot of growers cook brown rice and they inoculate it with the mycelium, and they're going to grow the mycelium of lion's mane on cooked brown rice. Okay, then the other way of doing it is to maybe, it's because growing in this country, if you grow the lion's mane, you put the mycelium on some sawdust and some wood because it's a wood-inhabiting species, it will eventually start producing fruiting bodies. It turns out in lion's mane, the fruiting body has some active compounds that we need for the nervous system, and then the mycelium has another one that also is very active that isn't in the fruiting body. So it's nice to have a combination of both, the fruiting body and mycelium, especially in this case. So there's mycelium grown usually on grain. Sometimes they add wood, some sawdust in there if it's a wood-inhabiting species like reishi, like lion's mane. But they still put a pretty good amount of cooked brown rice in there because the mushroom loves that. The mushroom loves that brown rice. It's like junk food to them or snack food because, it's all that sugar in it, all that glucose and starch. They just break it down so easily. Then you've got the fruiting body, pure fruiting body, and you could make a product out of that. That would be good. In most cases, the fruiting body is very good. But it's very expensive to produce fruiting bodies in this country because you have to go for several months in order for the mycelium to consume all of the substrate, all of the brown rice, and then start producing fruiting bodies. That takes quite a few months. Most manufacturers want to grow the mycelium out on the brown rice and then cut it up and dry it and cook it after maybe a month or two, because that's going to obviously give them a lot more product. Right. They can't afford to let it grow for 3 or 4 months and get the fruiting bodies oftentimes. So That's the drawback with the mycelium. Now, you could just go and try to get the fruiting bodies, but again, it's expensive to produce them in this country. So almost all the fruiting body products come out of China, and then that's going to be. And they say that like some of the bigger manufacturers that have fruiting bodies products, and that's all they have. They don't have any mycelium. They say that it's organically grown over there, but in my research, what I've looked quite a bit at the quality and the being really sure that if they say it's organic, it's well certified, and you can really count on it being, no pesticides, herbicides. I mean, over there, the water, the air is polluted, so that gives you a little bit of question about, okay, how pure is that? Where are they grown in?
Right.
That's going to be a question. Also, they have to ship it over again, so it's going to absorb moisture maybe. And at the end of the day, we don't have much recourse to see how they're actually growing them, whether they're extracting them, whether they're putting maltodextrin in there as a carrier, for instance. Right. So there are many questions that we would have if we're buying all of our fruiting bodies and then making products, powders from China. And I know a number of manufacturers that do that, even a local manufacturer here, that they get all their raw materials from China, all
right.
fruiting bodies.
Right.
So you've got a quandary there. And there are a couple of manufacturers that really do have a fair amount of fruiting bodies and a fair amount of mycelium that are organically grown and domestically grown. That's what I'm really like, domestically grown.
So to sum up, if one is looking for the domestic companies you mentioned, and it does it not matter whether you're getting fruiting bodies or mycelium? Is there a distinction or
right.
not?
Yeah, I just kind of went all around that.
Right.
Because there's a lot of background to it.
Right.
But yeah, at the end of the day, no. When you look at studies, I mean, here's what I say. I mean, I know a person that has a company here, you probably know him too, that is really a crusader for all fruiting bodies. And he'll say his vote is, and what he says is, mycelium bad, fruiting bodies good.
Right.
That's his marketing. And that's what his belief is. And so we've had a number of conversations. And what I bring up is the world's most highly studied medicinal mushroom is turkey tail, Drometes versicolor. There are more clinical trials on that one with about, when you really look at how many people were involved in these clinical trials, it's going to be around 4,000 or 5,000 people in these clinical trials. And the model is one group has the cancer, like intestinal cancer, stomach cancer. One group has the cancer and gets chemo, standard chemo. The other group has standard chemo and the turkey tail extract. And what they found and there are like maybe 15, 20 years of these clinical trials that have been published, that what they find in the best studies is that the group that gets the turkey tail plus the chemo, the 5-year survival rate is up to 30% higher.
Wow.
Number one. Number two, less nausea. And number three, and really important, and it's so obvious, is that when you take chemo, that tears your immune system down.
Right.
That really wrecks your bone marrow to produce more stem cells. When people that take the turkey tail plus the chemo, their immune system status is much better. But here's the kicker. All of the studies on turkey tail, all mycelium, all pure mycelium. So when he says, my friend says, mycelium bad, fruiting body good, I say, well, what about all these clinical trials, the best clinical trials in the world on medicinal mushrooms showing benefits, and it's all mycelium.
Right.
So, and he says, oh, well, that's a pharmaceutical product. But it's really just a concentrated extract of turkey tail mycelium. However, the one catch is it's all pure mycelium because they grow it in vats and then they centrifuge it to get rid of the liquid, and that's all pure mycelium. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, mycelium versus fruiting body, they're both active. They both have high levels of beta-glucans, terpenes, phenolics, and there really is no difference. So the main question really is your mycelium going to be pure, or is it going to be full of starch? And there's one way to tell. you get a bottle of Lugol solution, Lugol. It's iodine. This is a classic starch test. You buy a bottle off of Amazon or wherever. You take your capsules and maybe put 2 or 3 capsules of your lion's mane in a little water, stir it, put 10 drops of the iodine solution in there. If it turns bright blue, it's loaded with starch, and it stays bright blue. It's loaded with starch. So you do it at home. Don't take my word for it.
Well, I'll do both. So that brings up 2 issues. But a quick question before we get into one more deeper one, and that is, you and I are about the same age, and we grew up eating Flintstones vitamins as kids, and then one-a-day vitamins once we got older. Right. Americans like to cut to the chase. There's a lot of myco nerds like us, but if you had to recommend to the general public, what's the one vitamin, the supplement that gives you all the goodness of the fungal world without having to say, okay, I want some of this and some of this and some of this? Is there something you recommend to your patients that sort of you get the best of the best in one preparation?
Yes, and so you're not talking about vitamins and minerals. You're talking about just mushroom supplements.
Yes.
Mushroom supplements, there are 2 ways that you typically see them. One is you could get a single, like reishi, single lion's mane, single turkey tail, single maitake, chaga. So you just get the single. The other one is, you've got a 5 blend, you've got a 7 blend, you've got a 14 blend. So they mix all of these ones together. For me, the blends are good for just everyday health. So if you just want a broad spectrum medicinal mushroom product, get a 7 blend, get a 10 blend or 14 blend. There are different ones out there. And then you're getting the benefits, because the beta-glucans, the terpenes and so forth are different for every species. So you're getting kind of a broad spectrum effect. So I'm all for that, taking it daily as a powder, like a 7 blend, 14 blend, 10 blend. However, if you're dealing with like cancer, you're dealing with COVID and you want to boost your immune system up, you're dealing with protecting your kidneys, you're dealing with insomnia and agitation, then there are different single mushrooms that I would recommend. Because it turns out that the 2 most famous ones that are used and studied are turkey tail and reishi.
Right.
Those are, and now lion's mane is getting really popular. But if you look back in history, reishi has the longest history of use, probably 2,000 years. They were writing about it. They had pictures of it. So it's been revered for a long time. For a number of things. But then you've got turkey tail. It turns out that is a very good immune booster and has those clinical trials. It turns out that the 2 mushroom species with the very highest levels of beta-glucan are reishi and turkey tail. So reishi has about 55% beta-glucans. Turkey tail has around 60% beta-glucans. The other mushrooms are lower, like 20, 30, 40%. But so I would, if you're wanting to really strengthen your immune system against COVID or just keep it strong, I recommend reishi. Reishi has long been used for respiratory. So you can't go wrong if you've got a good reishi product that has plenty of beta-glucans in it and triterpenes. You can't go wrong with that one. I take it every day, every morning.
Cool.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please remember to give us a good rating and to subscribe and share with like-minded folks. We appreciate your support for the protection of the knowledge and biodiversity of South America by the Amazon Conservation Team. In the next episode of Plants of the Gods, we'll continue the discussion with Christopher Hobbs as we learn more about the magic of fungi and medicinal herbs.